Hello, everyone, and today we're going to be talking about conditional statements in JavaScript. And I'm really excited about this topic because this is one of the fundamental principles of writing code. This is what makes our code perform different logic steps. This is what makes our code decision-making abilities, and this is what makes it responsive and reactive. But first, to understand how it works in JavaScript, we have to take a look at how we make decisions. So here I have a few examples of decisions we could be making every day. For example, today was raining. Well, if it's raining, then you bring an umbrella. Otherwise, you would leave the umbrella at home. Now, we recently had an election. Well, if you're over the age of 18, then you can vote. Otherwise, you have to wait. And of course, all of the apps nowadays have you logging in. Well, if your password is correct, makes that decision to let you log in. Otherwise, it will give you an error saying if your password is incorrect or if your username is incorrect. And of course, whenever you're shopping, a lot of these shopping outlets online have free shipping, but you have to get a certain amount in your cart for that free shipping to be activated. So if your cart is over $50, then you get free shipping. Otherwise, it'll calculate the shipping based on wherever you are. Now, take a look at this. There is a clear pattern. We have if plus a condition, then action. Otherwise, different action. So if we take a look at this voting example, if the condition, your age being equal to or greater than 18 is met, then you can vote. Otherwise, you wait. Here you see, if the condition is met, you do one thing. If the condition is not met, you do a different thing. And it's going to work very similar in code with if, else, and else if statements. So what are conditional statements in JavaScript? Well, it's code that allows your app, that allows your script to make decisions based on whether or not the condition is true or false. And this is going to be most of the time. Your conditions are either going to be true or they're going to be false. Once you break it down to the very simple Boolean true or false decision, that's how you would make a very scalable app. Well, there's three parts to conditional statements. First, we have checking the condition. So you're going to take a variable and you're going to check it against the condition. In this case, in the case of voting, our variable is age. Well, let's check. Does your age equal or greater 18? Then it would decide if the condition is true, what to do, and if the condition is false, what other thing to do. Well, that's where we would get to the third part, which is the execution. Right? Once it decides if the condition is true or false, it gets to execute the code, whether it's telling you on the front end that you're not old enough to vote, or letting you through and allowing you to the portal where you can vote. Now let's take a look at a coding example. Let's start with the if statement. The if statement is what initializes our conditional statements. So if a condition is met, then something will happen. And here, the way it's broken down, you're going to see it starts with if, and your condition is always going to be in parentheses. Very important to remember. Then inside of your condition, you could be doing a few things, right? Here, we're matching age. So if the age is greater than or equal to a certain number, it will do something. But you could be matching words. Let's say if your subscription tier is premium, then do something. Could be matching, could be doing a different kind of match. Let's say if you have a subscription, then do something. So there's a lot of things you can use the condition in order to, steer your app and steer the people on your app in the right direction and create this decision-making process. So let's take a look. Now, what happens if it's false? Well, if it's false, in this case, it doesn't do anything. So let's take a look. Here we have our variable, which is age. Right? The variable is what we're going to measure against these conditions. Variable is typically your data point. Whenever you log into something, you give them your date of birth, they have your age. So we're going to let the age equal 20 in this situation. Now, if age is greater than or equal to 18, which in this case it is, your console will say, your app will say, you can vote. So in this case, we're going to get this output that you can vote since it's greater. But let's say if your age was 16, you will not get any output at all. It will skip your code. And that's where the else statement comes in. What if your condition is false? Well, if the condition is false, then else it would do something else, right? In the case of voting, if your age is greater than or equal to 18, you can vote. If it's not, you can't vote. Here we have an example of temperature. Let's say right now it's 65 degrees, so our temperature variable is 65. Now our condition is if temperature is greater than 70, then our code is going to say it's warm. Else, if it is not greater than 70, if the condition is false, it will say it's cold. And in this case, since 65 is less than 70, the condition is false, the condition is not met. It's going to output whatever is inside of the braces, whatever action is inside of the braces here in else. And you can start seeing how these are structured, right? We have if condition plus action, else, condition not met, another action. Now let's take a look at something that's a little bit more complicated. We saw our if-else statements, but how do we chain them together? How do we have multiple conditions? Well, we're going to see in a minute. First, let's discuss these operators. You guys have already seen greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, greater than, but there's also an equal operator if you want to match two exact values. Could be a string value as well. So, for example, if your name is Alisher, just like my name, something will happen. But it will not match them, of course, if there's ever so slightly. Let's say if your name is Alistair and my name is Alisher, it's going to give me a false action, right? Because the condition is not met. Well, we have really 6 main operators, 6 main tools that we can use to create conditions. Equal to, which is an exact match. Remember, it's 3 equal signs, not 1 equal sign. 1 equal sign means you're assigning a value. 3 equal signs means you're comparing values. Then not equal, which is an exclamation, and 2 equal signs. And then we have our regular operators like greater than, less than, greater or equal, and less than or equal. All of which we should be familiar from, your typical algebra class. Now, let's create some of our own statements. Here is else if. How do we chain multiple conditions? And I think this is a great example with a score because this actually shows you why it's also important to keep them in a certain order. So let's check this out. We have our test score. We just received our test. It's 85, but we want to convert it to a letter grade. So let's see how this code will help us convert it. Well, we're going to set up our conditions. So if the score is greater than 90 or equal to 90, the grade is going to be A. If the score is greater than or equal to 80, the grade is going to be B. And if it's greater than or equal to 70, it's going to be C. Otherwise, if none of these conditions are met, it's going to be F. And you see these are chained with else if. Else if is what allows you to have another condition. And what's very important in this situation is that we check it in reverse, in descending order of the score. Because if you take a look at this, 85 is greater than or equal to 70, and it's also is greater than or equal to 80. So in this case, if we were to do it in a different order, if we were to start with 70, it would just assume that we have grade C, because once the condition is met, once the condition is true, it will not check for the next condition. So you want to start in a certain descending order. And this is gonna be case by case basis, but this is something you're gonna have to figure out when you write your statements. Now, in this case, our score is 85. So once it gets to 85, and it checks to if the score is greater than or equal to 80, and it's gonna print grade B, it will no longer check if it's greater than or equal to 70 because the condition has already been met. Now let's say our score was 65. Well, in this case, it would go down the list checking. Is it greater than 90? No. Is it greater than 80? Also false. Is it greater than 70? Also false. And in that situation, it will default to the action inside of the else, which is grade F. Very important to remember. Now, we already did exercise 1, so let's do exercise 1 together, and let's break it down a little bit. And then we'll build it up to do exercise 2. So let's check this out. Now, here we have a few things already established. We have our variable established, which is the age. Right? So I'm 27. And now from this, from our variable, we're going to start comparing it using conditional statements, right? So if we're doing the voter example, the voter check, well, age should be greater than or equal to 18 in order for me to be able to vote. And so this will then say you can vote. Otherwise, if it's not true, it will say you cannot vote. Of course, once we run it, it's going to give me a message that I can vote because I am over or equal to 18, my age. But if we were to change this to, let's say, 15, well, then of course the logic there is going to lead me to the else action because it's false now, the condition. Now, let's try it with example number 2, exercise number 2, which is the subscription example. Right? All of these subscription services have different tiers of subscription. So we're going to establish our variable subscription because you want the variable to compare in the condition. Now, subscription is typically going to be a string, and all the strings are inside of quotes, whether it's a double quote or a single quote. And we're going to say premium. We have premium subscription. Now, in order to make our conditional, we're going to need to use an exact match. So we're going to say if subscription, and remember, when you compare, you want to use 3 equal signs. If subscription is equal to premium, you're going to say you have premium. And if it doesn't equal to premium, you're going to say you don't have a subscription. So as you can see, since we let our subscription set to premium, if we change this to starter, well, it's going to say you don't have a subscription. Or if you change it to free, pretty much anything except premium exactly as it's spelled. Now, let's change some of these together, right? So we have else, but now we can chain them together and have multiples, right? So let's say if subscription equals starter, then say you have starter. Now we'll add else if, and don't forget braces and parentheses. So remember, our conditions are always going to be in parentheses. Else if subscription equals pro, then it's going to do something else, right? Then it's going to say that we have pro. And you guys also want to get used to the habit of copy and pasting because a lot of code is rewriting the same line. So you have pro. And of course, we'll do another one, same way, else if premium. premium. Have premium. So now check this out. We can say that we have starter, and it will determine that we have starter from all of these conditional statements. And then if we say premium, it's going to go from this statement. It's going to determine that this is false. Go to the next one, determine that this is false as well. Go to the third one, determine that this is true, and eventually arrive at a conclusion that I have premium. Now, if I was to put free, it's going to go through all three of these statements to determine definitively that all of these are false and that you're going to arrive at this, you don't have a subscription, at this else statement. So this is how conditionals work. And you guys can play around with this. You can change the variables. You can make it an integer. You can make it a string. Typically, when you have a string, you want an exact match. Otherwise, it gets a little bit messy. Now, let's take a look at some common mistakes that you will run into. When it comes to conditionals, you're not going to use a single equal sign because age equals 18 declares the age. However, age with a triple equal sign followed by 18 compares the age. It's a very fundamental difference. Also forgetting the braces. So after the condition, after you have your condition in parentheses, you want to have braces for the next action that will occur based on the condition. Otherwise, what it's going to do is it's just going to run whatever's in line 1 and error out. Now, you might also be missing parentheses, so make sure that your conditions are inside of parentheses. And another thing you'll notice, when you have if and else if statements with conditions, you know it's a condition because it has if in front of it. If lets it know this will be a condition that will need to be either met or be false in order for the next actions to proceed. And of course, sometimes you have the wrong order, as we discussed before. You want to make sure that logically your order makes sense. In the case of grading, we started with the highest number and then kept descending with each condition because that's your order of elimination there. However, in a different case, it might be something else. You know, in subscriptions, what you typically have is people, if they have starter, they get one thing. And then if they have pro, they'll get everything in starter plus something else. So in that case, again, order becomes very important. And of course, we looked at a lot of these real world applications. In e-commerce, if you have a certain amount in your cart, you'll get free shipping. Content access on Netflix. If you pay for the subscription, you get access to those videos. Of course, form validation. Whenever you're logging in, whenever you're filling out any kind of form with your address, it validates whether certain characters are present, what kind of characters are present. There's a lot of conditional checking going on every day. Even when you go to a website and you have dark theme versus light theme, it's a conditional check that it does against your system, and it checks if your system is dark mode or light mode. This is how you build your logic, your fundamental logic of the application. And to recap, conditionals are what let our apps make decisions based on whether or not the condition has been met. Now, you would use if to check your condition, and then if that condition is true, run some sort of an action. So if this is true, do this. You would use else if that condition is false, if that condition is not met. If this is true, do this. Otherwise, do something else. And then you would use else if you want to chain multiple conditions together. So if this is true, do this. Otherwise, else if this is true, do this. And we saw this in the case of the subscriptions. So if you have free, it will say you have free. If you have starter, it will say you have starter. If you don't have any subscription, it'll say you don't have a subscription. And of course, don't forget, our operators what are what creating the conditions. They're creating that environment of evaluating. Is the condition true? So very important, our operators are equals, triple equal sign, does not equal, which is exclamation and two equals, greater than, less than, then greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. And of course, always use inside of your conditions a triple equal sign if you want to compare the exact values. A singular equal sign in JavaScript assigns a value, does not compare the value. And next time you use an application, just think to yourself, what kind of conditionals might this be using? Because if you think about it, our applications that we use every day have thousands of conditionals that make it work. And I'm going to leave you guys here. There is a great handout with some coding examples that I have attached. And I hope you have fun playing around with conditionals and coming up with your own conditions eventually when you build your own app. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Have fun coding.